I have to find out more about what they're doing.
Yeah, because these are all over the country. There are more hours of television produced through the access facilities than all the rest of the television industry concerned in terms of hours.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but they're not connected. They have to get connected. There's some things.
Are they supported not only by Time Warner, but by other, all by cable companies?
Varying degrees and varying ways it's done, you know.
We'll have to talk more about that. I want to hear about it.
Welcome very much to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program Seth Neugroschl. And Seth is a professor, long-term professor, class I think of 40 himself, out of Columbia University.
Right.
And he is he's the chairman or the convener of a really interesting symposium or a seminar at Columbia called, what is it called? Computers, Man, and Society.
Right.
And it's about that we wanted to talk. And Seth, welcome very, very much to Conversations and to Manhattan Network.
Thank you, Harold. It's an absolute delight to be here. You've been talking to me about coming for a long time, and you finally convinced me, and I'm delighted to be here.
So, Seth, let me get this little thing. It's a little bit formalized and everything, but it's a little introduction. I'll read about you, and then we can talk about the Computer Society developments and so forth. Anyway, Seth Neugroschl is co-chairman Columbia University Seminar on Computers, Man, and Society with Professor James D. Hayes, Professor of Earth Environmental Science, Core Laboratory, Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. It's over, I guess, in Jersey, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Up the Hudson.
Previously, from 1981 until his death in 1990, with Professor Edgar Lorch, Chairman Emeritus Department of Mathematics at Columbia. Yeah? He was Associate Professor of Industrial Engineering in Organizational Design and Behavior at Columbia's FU School.
Fu School.
I'm sorry, I thought I was Mr. Future.
No.
You know, Fu School of Engineering and Applied Science.
Right.
All right. In parallel, he was a strategic planner at IBM for 23 years. His focus was particularly on communication, what we have now called the new medium. Since then, his research has been in the areas of the seminar's focus. Okay. Prior to IBM, international management, consulting in corporate planning, marketing, and manufacturing for major private corporations. Also, economic and rural development consulting assignments for corporations and the United States Department of State in post-World War II Europe and Latin America. And Seth, welcome very, very much to the studio here. It's really good to see you.
I'm very happy to be here. And how do we begin?
Well, I don't know. What's the Fu School? I mean, that threw me. I didn't know what that was.
When I went there, it was just plain engineering school of Columbia University. And then relatively few years ago, someone with a lot of money gave $25 million or so to the school, and so it's now the Fu School.
Was that person named Fu?
Yes.
I see. Okay, I see. Okay, good. Well, that's a lesson. That's good. I see. Okay, thank you very much. But listen, we've been talking about a lot of things. I was introducing you to this place. You're not familiar that much with Access, but this is quite a facility we have here. But I wonder, maybe let's share with you your own background, if you could, because there's a great deal we can talk about, the things the computer, the seminar is concerned with. But could you share some of your own background, just where you went to school?
Sure. I got my engineering degree at Columbia University, Columbia College and Columbia University. It was a class of 40 college and 41 engineering, and we had the choice of taking 3 years in the college and 2 years in the engineering school. My dad was concerned that being Jewish, I might not get a job in engineering pre-World War II.
Really?
Oh, that was the way things were at that point. And so he said he survived the Depression very well as a teacher in the high school system when other people were very close to the edge.
Amazing.
And so he said, take teaching courses in addition, instead of just being engineering. And I took the extra year at Teachers College and had a wonderful guy who changed my life at Teachers College. He was a professor in the history of education, and his central theme was education should be focused on change rather than just a rote memory of the past. And he elaborated that during this whole year course that we had, and we hit it off extremely well. And he said, Seth, rather than go into electrical engineering, which is what I was, from the time I was 10, interested in radio and electronics.
You were?
And
Tinkering like
oh,
actually with the
ham radio, all of that stuff.
Yeah. Heath Kits, do you
so
remember Heath Kits?
I'm sorry?
Do you remember Heath Kits?
Oh, that was long afterwards.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, absolutely,
right,
but I put Heath Kits together.
Oh, all right, yeah. All right.
But at any rate, he said, rather than going to electrical engineering, or in fact, a couple of my physics instructors who later got Nobels said I should be in physics.
You're a physics professor?
Two young
the Nobel Prize?
Two instructors of mine at Columbia when I took engineering physics.
You were well schooled.
Oh, and how some superb people there. At any rate,
who were they? Do you remember?
Sure. One was Polycarp Cush, and the other was, I forget his first name, Lamb. Cush and Lamb both got Nobels, and they were young instructors with me. But anyhow, I didn't go into physics. I didn't go into electrical engineering. He introduced me, this teacher at TC, to the chair of the industrial engineering department, which I'd never heard about before. So I went over to speak to Walter Rautenstrauch, who was a giant of a guy who had left mechanical engineering in a great battle with the chair of the mechanical engineering department because he felt that there was could be a science of management, and the head of the mechanical engineering department said, nonsense, you either know how to manage or you don't know how to manage. So anyway, so I went talked to Rowdy, which was what we used to call him, and decided to switch to industrial engineering, and industrial engineering shaped my life because instead of being a well-defined profession, it was a new conception which was just forming. And so when I got out, I said, what do industrial engineers really do? How do I...
Well, I was about to ask you, but go,
the idea was it came in part from scientific management with Frederick Taylor, who had a very detailed analytic approach to how you treat the people down on the workbench. You analyze in detail what they do with time study, and then you tell them how to do it right. And they're the robots who follow the instructions of the industrial engineers who tell them how to do things. And then there was another, Gilbreth, who had a very different philosophy, but the same analytic approach, but then integrating the conceptions with the workers themselves, so they could do the analysis, but then finally put it together themselves and use the analysis themselves. Very different conception of how to deal with people in organizations. So anyhow, Rowdy was very much in that latter mode, but he was much broader, and he had a kind of systems view of information flows through organizations. He really was a precursor of much that's happening right now.
Some of it technologically based.
Absolutely. So he was extraordinary, and that was the way I got my basic training, then went on to work in the war industry during the Second World War, and then before I joined IBM, I must have covered some 15 or so industries that I did management consulting in. But my overriding approach during all this time was questions. First of all, questions of who am I and how do I define myself, because I didn't have a nice fixed identity. I wasn't a doctor, I wasn't a lawyer, I wasn't each of those. They may approach their professions differently, but their basic approach is they're framed by their particular discipline. And industrial engineering, you ask questions, and that's what a management consultants do.
When did the term industrial engineer, or when did that enter the lexicon? When was it developed? Was it Taylor?
Rowdy was one of the first. He started the department in the late 20s or early 30s. And I joined must have been late 20s, because I moved into the department in 1938, 39.
And then you were in the class of 40.
I was in class of 40 college and 41 engineering.
I see,
And so anyhow, this gives you a little sense of, so my whole career was shaped by that major meeting of the minds of this professor at Teachers College, and then Rowdy, and going that way. So instead of having a nice defined identity. I spent my life asking questions and stepping outside organizations and looking at organizations, and I'm still doing that.
Well, Seth, you've done something right, because you're one of the most interesting people I've ever run into, and you're always asking questions and posing questions, and you're very into like that. And the seminar is an absolute delight that you head up. I'm happy to be a member of it. And
I'm delighted. You're always add huge new viewpoints as you come.
So now, maybe we could talk from that. You were with IBM for quite a while.
I was for 23 years while I was teaching organizational behavior, and the chair of the IE department, much later, this is halfway through my professional career, asked me to teach a course in organization management, an introductory course for first-year IE students. And I came there a week before this course was to begin, and he said, just to get things ready, and I had done all my preparation, he said, Seth, I'm going to be retiring in a year. I want you to take over a course that I've been teaching for 15 years called Managerial Interaction, and here's a stack of paper this high.
Go over it this weekend.
And I said, will you do it? I said, I'll be glad to do it, but I'll have to work very fast to decide what is managerial interaction, and I will be glad to take your pile of papers, but I don't guarantee how and where I'm going to be using them. He said, that's fine. You do it your way.
Right.
So I did.
You like teaching, right?
I enjoyed it, because what I did over this period of time was this, given the Rowdy's initial conceptions of a system view of organization and management, and thinking about human beings interacting with each other. And I evolved over those dozen years that I taught that course as adjunct associate professor at the engineering school. While I was at IBM, I evolved for myself a sense of human beings interacting with each other in institutions as a framework for thinking about people, how they functioned, how they got their own identity in institutional terms, and how alternate ways of designing an organization could make a fundamental difference in both the organization's success and individuals' success and satisfaction in the organization.
These principles of design that are put into, let's say, the establishment of a particular blueprint of how something's going to be done, a factor of the human interaction and the human realities of that. That's another part of a design thing that is needed in order to have things work right.
Exactly right. And so what I did was to get students to think in those terms. These are all graduate students who are working in all the major companies around the metropolitan area. I had one student who was a colonel at West Point. He was head of a department at West Point, responsible for ordnance, I think. And he was extraordinary, but he was getting his PhD in the department. And after we got done, he looked at, halfway through, the first part was a kind of conceptual framework introducing the students to this way of thinking about people and organizations. The second half was actually responsibility to do a project, a real on-the-ground project of something that was going on in their organizations. What this guy did was look at West Point as a system.
I see.
And this is, again, this is in the late 60s at a time with all the upheaval, and some of it was touching the students who were coming into West Point.
Really, sure, it was what a feisty time,
So he did, for the second half of the course, a systems look at West Point and the way in which they dealt with their students and how should they think differently about that. And the result was the superintendent liked what he did, which he showed to him enough so that he put him on special assignment to implement some of the things that he had come up with in the course of. So that's kind of systems view of people in context.
Okay, good. That's what I wanted. Systems. When did help me out? Maybe you can help me out here, because systems, I sort of take it because you understand I'm a tremendous fan of Buckminster Fuller, who used to think in very
I've been hearing about that from time to time.
You know, and others, but and comprehensive overview thinking. But when did the term in the lexicon generally of academia or otherwise, the notion of systems come into being, and what exactly are we talking about when we talk about a systems approach to things? Because that's it seems to me like in a generic sense, that's a very big concept in and of itself, just a systems view. It comes trippingly off the tongue, but it has great meaning, doesn't it?
Well, It evolved actually from some of the thinking during the Second World War on how to deal with different ways of thinking. As a matter of fact, during the Battle of Britain, some of the early people thinking about how to deal with the German planes attacking, and they had to defend with very limited resources, and how to put those resources in place most effectively in order to maximize the probability of their knocking down German planes. And they did the same kind of systems approach to dealing with tracking submarines, and they had a fresh approach to thinking conceptually about taking the total process. And trying to look at how were they currently dealing with tracking German subs, and they found that by they were doing things quite wrong in multiple ways, and they came up with much more effective ways of dealing with the German attacking planes and the submarines that they were attempting to attack, using this kind of total system view.
A total systems view where you take, instead of going in depth into one particular thing, you're trying to get patterns between systems. It's like pattern recognition. You can see a whole system and an overview.
It's stepping outside and looking top down in effect. And as a matter of fact, you and I have talked multiple times at the seminar about the work that Jim Hayes did
exactly
Jim,
he's at Doherty,
he's at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, and he was the chair of a committee that put an undergraduate major into Barnard and Columbia on the environment, and the approach was very fundamentally the same. It was they were saying, if you step outside the Earth and look down, as we did when we had that moon shot, and they had that extraordinary picture of the small blue planet.
Yeah, or we could encourage people to think in terms of big patterns or comprehensive rather than specialized. Yeah,
absolutely.
Just throw that in as a pedagogic thing, you know.
Yeah, but just follow the idea down.
Okay, fine.
That when you stepped outside and saw the small blue planet, they had a couple of years later a UN conference on the environment, and the comments, as the Times described the comments of 100 different specialties that were looking at various aspects of the Earth, was that, but it's one system.
Of course.
And we have 100 different people looking at the blind man and the elephant kind of story.
Right, yeah. Looking at it from their parochial perspective or something.
Well, not parochial, because if you don't understand the system, the first thing you do is look at a piece of it.
And then you can get all bent out of shape, and you see, who was it? Who was the famous cyberneticist? Norbert Wiener.
Of course.
He said information overload within a system permits pattern recognition. So there might be an information overload or too much going on, but you can raise to another level, a higher level, and then you can see what's happening in the system. Everybody's all concerned with what's happening here with a parochial view or a local view. But if they get the overview, you can see patterns. And human beings in the mental process are particularly good at pattern recognition.
Absolutely. And it's visual and intuitive and visceral, as well as verbal and formal and in a written sense.
And your colleague Hayes is really interested in that overview and that large comprehensive systems view of the blue planet.
Yeah, he said, in fact, that the flows of energy and matter in and out of sinks, including us,
that sounds like Fuller,
is more effective, as a more real in describing the way in which the planet as a whole functions than the separate disciplines of biology, chemistry, and geology.
Well, that was Mr. Fuller. God bless him, Mr. Fuller. The start of his book, Synergetics, Dare to be Comprehensive, and the thought of us in people's mind is, there's so incredible much to know, and everything is so interesting. How can you be concerned with the whole thing when, if you go into depth in this little specialized field over here, you can go on endlessly into new nuances of change and everything, and there's 16 million colors that there can be used, and you can go into great depth and so on, particularly with quantification. So the idea of and there is no department in a university of comprehensive understanding as Mr. Fuller understood
except for the university seminars, which were founded right after the Second World War with the idea that exactly as you said, the university is fragmented by department and professional schools specialty, and that in fact what we have to do is have a place in the university for dialogue on major issues, major problems that cut across things. And given what's happening today with computers, that I can't think of all the seminars, this is certainly one of the most relevant to the initial founding conception of the founders of the university seminars.
Yeah, and you're talking university seminar at Columbia.
At Columbia, I'm talking about there's some 78 of those university seminars.
Are there really?
At Columbia, which mine is one. Mine was founded in the mid-'60s.
It was in the 60s,
and my co-chair and I took it. Ray Lorch and I were asked to take it over.
In mathematics.
He was chair of the mathematics department.
Right.
And we were asked to take it over in 1980, actually, and we visited John Kemeny, who was president of
Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
He was president of Dartmouth. And he was a very well-known...
with Kennedy.
Kemeny.
No, but wasn't he connected with Kennedy, President Kennedy, or am I wrong?
No,
I'm thinking sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
He was in fact working on the 3 Mile Island report for Carter. At the time that we visited him, and he was hiding somewhere finishing that report, and he came in. We flew up for the day, and he came in specially because he was a friend of Ray's, and we spent the day together because he had given a lecture on computers and society, computers and society, I think was the title, and at the Metropolitan American Museum of Natural History. And the theme of that was nothing less than that the challenges facing us as a species in terms of the nuclear threat, the pollution threat, the other threats to survival, population threats. All of those were so complex and so intertwined.
Yeah, intertwined, right.
That the computer might be viewed as a new human symbiote, which might offer the possibility of helping us deal with this complexity at a level where it would make a difference in our survival on this planet.
And
so that started to be
that was one of the themes of the seminar.
That was not the central driving
the mission
theme,
statement.
The mission statement of the seminar.
Nothing's more relevant. I mean, no question is more relevant.
So it was the issue of survival and quality of life, and that was the starting focus of the seminar. But 1981 was the year PCs were announced. So that the result was that we decided to be very pragmatic and specific in the speakers that we had, because we had to deal with those realities at the same time, to step back from time to time and say, but here's this large picture and we want to be sure we're moving on it. And we did.
Well, you can see things. If you take the large picture view, you can see things that people are running, or that it gives a different perspective than, it's like physics. It's quantum mechanics, and Mr. Einstein was always looking for the big, unified field theory or something.
And they're still trying to put the two together, right?
That kind of thing. But the systems thing, and I don't know, the comprehensivist. Another thing that I got this genome now. I mean, all these knowledge, these collections of knowledge are coming at this time with such rapidity now. I mean, in this time measured against 200,000 years of human evolution. I keep coming back to this. 10,000 generations, and my father's father didn't have electricity. I mean, the things that are happening, technological extension is so rapid. We now know the genome, and we now know that there's 100 trillion cells that make up a human organism, and that all those cells, the DNA puts them together so that each of these cells is operating, but they're all operating as a system. As a system, and that's a communication thing that's going on, which is in a certain sense a metaphor for something that might be able to be understood through the kind of and the fact that we have this technological extension of our capability and all of the technology that exists, and that's what's changing so rapidly. The computer is entering into it, and the computing capability, bringing new dimensions to our ability to understand these processes.
Well, it lets us step back.
Just been a dream in the past.
It's for the first time lets us have a way of, number one, stepping back and seeing visually this process, because structure and process of physical realities that are going on, whether it's individual human beings or us collectively interacting with this whole global natural world that we're totally a part of, but also thinking about ourselves and how we have built, how we put structure and process on our social realities, on civilizations for 5,000 years. And we built a series of civilizations. They're all human-built systems.
That's right.
Based upon what we designed interactively. And we're doing a new one right now. We're putting a global civilization in place right now with the web as a crucial part of how we communicate with each other. So the question is, are we going to have a Tower of Babel there, or do we have some kind of conceptual framework to think about the whole picture as well as our own personal picture and put the two together in a way that will reduce the probabilities of our having a disaster over the next few decades. I mean, the threats that...
and those capabilities are there in a new, unique kind of way. Dr. Lederberg, who you had, he's a great scientist, a great human being, was at the seminar, and he
last May, as a matter of fact.
Last May, and he brought Joshua Lederberg, and he has said that we have, I mean, again, that sweep of human history, and that we have the capability with, so you could think thermonuclear, or
but
you
he's
could
also
think
talking biological.
But that we crossed the line where we could render, let's say, a geopolitical decision made by almost an individual within an intellect world and so forth, make it so that we could render the habitat of the Earth incapable of the continuation of the species.
Well, certainly.
And that's only been within the last 10 or 15 years.
We saw that in the subway system in Tokyo.
That,
with the sarin, we saw the World Trade Towers. All of these.
But that capability simply... That Promethean capability, which is destructive on one side of an equation, has simply not been there. You could wipe out, I mean, on a planetary system scale, you could wipe out the tribe in the other village, or you could try to wipe out all the people with a skin color different than you, or some sort of thing like that. They can work this out. But we were collectively, in a certain sense, protected as a species, as a forward-moving species with some sort of purpose in the universe, from our own destructive capabilities and so forth, by a certain degree, our impotence. But now we've gone through some sort of a qualitative transformation. The adverse side of the destructive scenario might be something that makes possible liberations and possibilities for, self-actualization of great numbers of people, in Maslow's term and so forth, that have been undreamed of throughout the human experience. So this is an exciting time, I guess, is what we're saying.
It's a tremendously exciting and extraordinary time, and you're absolutely right in emphasizing that the potential of this extraordinary phenomenon of a global digital environment that we're just really beginning to get our feet wet with. We're in the very early stages of, has potential for disaster and potential for a huge promise, potential for huge evolution of human beings in a more constructive way. But the issues are the kind of conceptual models in our heads. Lederberg, as a matter of fact, you may remember, said, talking about 500 years of dealing with microbes, that at the time of
he's a bacteriologist.
Right. Well, he was talking about the Black Plague 500 years ago, and he said at that time the sense of people who trying to understand what could possibly be causing the Black Plague were convinced it was witches. Witches. And of course, the conception didn't help those poor women who were identified as witches. It didn't help the people who had that model in their heads either. And hopefully
ignorant.
So that we are hopefully building better models in our heads of the natural world that are hopefully, and matter of fact, we still have problems with antibiotic-resistant microbes right now.
Absolutely.
And we have to think freshly about how we think about microbes in us. And that was one of the points that he was making. But on the other side, the human-built world that we're talking about, over 5,000 years and 30 civilizations, we are, I think for the first time, have the possibility of being aware of the fact that we're building a global civilization right while we're doing it, and share that vision and ask ourselves the fundamental question, what kind of world do we want to build?
Yeah,
what kind of world do we want to build? 4 billion of our 6 billion are living in the underdeveloped world with a dollar or two,
poverty,
a dollar or two a day. Can we continue that and survive, or is there going to be such huge anger from pockets of that underdeveloped world that as access to weapons of mass destruction become more easy and more fluid? You know, they're not going to be coming only via missiles. They can come via be smuggled in over the border. So we're talking about suitcase, the nuclear weapons. So the issue is really we're in this boat together, all 6 billion of us, and we either are going to survive over the next decades or we have the possibility of destroying ourselves.
First time in history we've had that capability. I mean, we could have, if we could have somehow induced in the minds of all the people on the planet, say 1,000 years ago, the idea they should line up 2 by 2 and stick a stake in each other's heart at this given moment, but it would have been a little hard to coordinate because there was no communication or anything like that. But now it can happen at because it's interconnected and so forth. It makes it a different kind of thing that we have to be protected, and it could be where I said last week, I was talking with David Finn, right? And I said that, you know, every night we watch we watch the News Hour with Jim Lehrer. Everybody watches the News Hour almost. And you got David Brinkley advertising for Archer Daniel Midland, and they say, no problem with food. We got plenty of food. We can produce all the food you could imagine for everybody. 6 billion, heading for 10. It's a metaphor for material capability to provide. With augmented technology and so forth, we can provide almost where one could see that we could provide and perhaps transcend the very notion that's been so intrinsic to the war making of scarcity. I mean, people could have what it is that they need. We have the capability of providing that, whereas in the historical pattern, it was a hard, long struggle on the Serengeti Plain, and we didn't have that. But is that one of the luxuries, possibly, of the time that spreads out here before us? Do we have a productive capability that is unprecedented in terms of anything that history offers?
Well, the issue is, you know, I told you my life I've been asking questions.
Yes, right.
And what are the relevant questions in a given situation? The global situation today is one of what kind of world do we want to build? It is in our collective hands to build very different worlds, and the decisions that we make, both in the way the total global net is structured and whether or not there are closed enclaves that with gatekeepers, or whether we have an open information flow process which cannot be controlled by gatekeepers, say at a national level or corporate level, whatever, but truly open information flows, and with a ability to project on the web, as Frank, what's his name, Ryan Craig described when he talked of Fathom. With Fathom, the projecting out of the combined wisdom, if you will, of Columbia and 12 other institutions, world-class institutions, and projecting that out in a way and finding ways of making the sum of their knowledge more than the individual pieces, in the same way that the president of Harvard, Rudenstein, talking about the strategic direction for Harvard, is that we have to find ways, and he's working on doing it, to make the sum of the 20 or so units that there are within the schools.
You're talking now Fathom now, you're talking Fathom?
I'm going from Fathom to Harvard,
right.
and saying that the problem is the same. How do you, at the level of the university, at the level of a collectivity, which is Fathom, in both cases, how can you make the collectivity and the combined wisdom that's there add up to more than the individual pieces?
Yeah, right. Well, that's synergy, isn't it?
That is true, and we're moving towards thinking about a systems view of people in the natural world and in the human-built world as a kind of top-down view, in the same way that Jim Hayes talks about at the level of the Earth as a single system. Think about all 6 billion of us in systems terms. Think about one individual, you across your lifetime, from the point where you didn't have language, and you slowly evolved to the point where you had words, and you have a set of models in your head, which defines the way you think.
But or any individual,
any of 6 billion of us.
Amazingly complex and
but the point is that we're beginning in our understanding of how the brain functions to integrate psychology and neurology, for example, so that we have the beginnings of an information flow model of individuals from birth to death in terms of how do we evolve, how do we become how do we build the models in our heads that define us and the way in which we interact with the structures in the social world that we've built.
Right. Now, the structure, if I may, I understand.
Of course.
Well, that sounds like synergy. Behavioral systems unpredicted by the sum of its parts. There's something more, resonatingly more than the sum of the parts. So each one of those cells in the system are related by some sort of a resonancy that interaccommodates them as a system and so forth. That's a synergy, and that's something that we would want to do. But we have inherited, and then that's done within time. I mean, time change. Things change through time, and we get to the point where we have this new capability, so that there's a new capability that was not characteristic of the historical context, and yet all of our institutions, our frames of reference, the architecture of our mental thought processes, even just physical architecture, and our social architecture of income distribution, income arrangements, economics, what is possible, what isn't, politically, economically, and all these sort of things, we've inherited from a historical context,
of course,
that ontologically, perhaps, or in terms of the actual reality, is being changed by transformative capabilities, which offer something that the historically wasn't there, and that were of a time of qualitative transformation.
Yeah, but the issue is, can
in this long-term evolution of humanity as part of a broader evolution of universal consciousness. We're at a time of awakening.
We hope, and particularly if this new medium offers us the possibility of each of us individually of stepping outside ourselves, outside of whatever systems we're sitting in, and looking down on it and coming back in and
like
doing
the blue planet, right?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I had a visitor from California and who's one of the top national experts on adoption. And he's a friend whom I've been talking about these things with for many years, and he comes to the seminar on occasions when he's in New York. And he said, you know, our discussions have changed the way I've looked at the entire adoption process, because the adoption process in the United States has shifted dramatically over the last 10 years, and particularly the last 5 years, because of major changes, number one, in the technologies associated with people being unable to have children.
All right.
That's part, but also because of the rising level of income, even in the minority communities, so that there is a growing dearth of adoptable babies, and there's a huge growth in adoption from babies overseas, and a move in on a profit of the marketplace in this whole process, with attorneys moving in who make a lot of money on this. The charges per baby are huge.
Yeah, right.
And so the whole adoption process has become a commercial in the market process, and with major questions about outcomes for the individual children involved.
Right,
and,
sure, absolutely.
So that anyhow, for all of these reasons, he said, it's just we as an adoption community, and he's talking about all the professionals and all the adoption agencies around the country, and he's published major books on this and shifted some of the thinking. He said, we just didn't realize the external context of what was going on in our own area of work, because we didn't look at the demographics, we didn't really look at the implications
getting
of the
out
new
toward
technology.
A more systems approach, right?
Exactly right.
Seeing things in a larger context.
Right. So that is exactly what I'm saying for, and this applies to each of the social areas and each of the social systems that we're involved in, and the kinds of questions. We have to be able to step back and see holes and step down to the immediate out and look at essentially one way I like to describe it is think in terms of purpose, structure, process, and outcomes.
All right.
And thinking of asking the crucial questions of what are our purposes, and hopefully being able to look at it not only in terms of what's good for me, but what is good, enlightened goodness, so that we can think about survival generally. And this Hillel quote, if you remember,
Hillel,
you remember his quote, if I am not for myself, who is for me? If I am for myself alone, what am I?
If not now, when? Yes, right.
So that really is the kind of question that we have to ask ourselves with this new capability, which is explosively growing, and particularly with broadband coming in, and all of this digitalization, which we didn't have time to talk about.
Well, that's all just like that's all just coming now. I mean,
digitalization of video, and the structure of video being, instead of delivered from central points down to passive viewers.
Beginning to look like DNA, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really does seem to be like that.
Right.
Or, you know, some philosophers tell, Heide Chardin had written about some of those things, about the noosphere. He called it the noosphere. It would be, you know, the lithosphere and the hydrosphere and the biosphere and that sort of thing. And then there was the noosphere, which was the intellectual, the realm of intellectual understanding.
Lewis Thomas used to write about that,
Lives
too.
of a Cell,
he also talked about somehow was there a life after death, and he said there might be conceptually.
Well, that's another big question that's beginning to happen. I saw there was a thing in there where the question of, you know, the religious question, or the idea of whether or not there's a design. It becomes whether there's a design. Bucky Fuller used to feel there was a design in universe. You know, that's a big question. Some people might call that intelligence design. Is there an intelligent design to the evolution of universe? That's a big question about, you know, revolving
it's
God.
The ultimate questions of what's before the Big Bang, and was there...
Did you see the piece in the paper the other day where they were talking about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'm saying. Every day is a revolution of understanding about these things if you see these things in that way. There aren't enough places. Seminar. Your seminar is really good. The seminar, I mean, in the educational process itself, whether it's in extended learning, I mean, the thing is if you were to go, all right, you come to the university and present yourself, all right, what are you going to study? I'm going to study everything. There is no place for you to go where you can be interested in everything. You're going to be broken down into this or that or some subject, and there's been a tendency to specialization and expertise, and, you know, it's not, in medicine it's the same. You're just a specialist on the right femur or something, and it gets very, you understand what I'm saying? There's not been much of an impetus toward
But actually in the last
comprehensiveness, or is it coming back?
No, Harold, in the last 20 years or so, I see increasingly there was an explosion of specialization in scientific research with the establishment of the National Science Foundation at the end of the Second World War, and at the time it was founded, there was some discussion, should the approach be essentially a reductionist approach of specialization, or should there be science in context of society? And that was turned down because Vannevar Bush, who was Roosevelt's chief science advisor, felt that he had a dim view of human sciences. I think possibly properly at that time in terms of where they were at. But I think in the interim we've developed enough understanding at multiple levels of human beings and the way in which we function. There is a move across all of the human sciences to begin to integrate them and see that process whole. And I see this, my wife is a clinical psychologist, my daughter is a psychiatrist, and I see in the journals from their professional organizations, that kind of thing is going on all the time. So we're at the point where we can have a kind of fresh look. Systems look is very much in the wind
now. In the wind, yeah, it is.
Because
well, good. I think that's I think that's healthy. I mean, it's moving that way because it's the Hindus have been telling us for a long time there are no academic disciplines in reality. It is in reality a seamless web that we want to understand, and there's a relationship between them. Whether the interest in ecology is something that is reflected in the popular, you know, notion that we have to be in touch with the overall system of which we're a part, that sort of thing. More and more people are doing that. Economics. There's now developing at the Economics Association a realm of social economics. So they're beginning to bring not just economics as a pure science, Robert Heilbronner's argued that we've become too scientific with our formulas trying to get absolute rational behavior. They're going to try and get like sociology brought in and other kinds of things. And that these things have to be seen as a system.
Danny Bell is a famous sociologist, is working on a, now retired from he was at Columbia, now at Harvard, and is writing a book.
Danny or Daniel?
Daniel Bell.
Not Daniel.
Daniel Bell.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and he's writing a book on the end of sociology.
Really?
Yeah. So that the point is that people from multiple disciplines across the human sciences, including economics, including psychology, including sociology, including anthropology, have very much moving in the direction of this, finding the commonalities.
And then anthropology and sociology will go over and finally be talking to chemistry and to physics and to a comprehensive sort of. Remember C.P. Snow wrote that thing about two societies back in the 50s. I think that there was the arts and the science could blend.
We may see the beginnings of convergence, because there was an article, in fact, in the issue of Science magazine on the genome, and
amazing.
It was a wonderful. It was a wonderful sort of summary issue of Science magazine, and the lead editorial closed with the point that we cannot define ourselves solely by the genome. That some people have asserted that defines all of humanity, and he said this is nonsense. That you have to begin to integrate the humanities and the social sciences and genomics going to proteomics.
Proteomics.
That's because the genome DNA moves to create protein.
Oh, right, okay,
so proteomics, I think is the term that they use. And so
if that's not right, they'll come up with a right one soon.
Right. And so that it's just really we are so much at the bare beginnings of our understanding of total systems, even on a natural system level, let alone human system level. But we have to ask the right questions and recognize that in human-built systems, we are individually and collectively creating them every day.
Now in a unique kind of way.
That's correct. And we either do it in a way which does not reflect the ultimate purpose of survival and a respect for others as well as ourselves, the potential of symbiosis, of cooperation as well as competition, which turns out to be a fundamental dimension of the way in which evolution is now thought of, and this is a matter of the last 30 years, shifted from pure competition in Darwinian competition to the major role of symbiosis, of cooperation in the whole evolutionary process, is a crucial part of it.
It's not an idealistic wish, it's something that we can find.
No, it describes the reality of what happens in evolution, and in fact, species survive and don't survive, and crucially, for us right now, the issue of cooperation and competition and finding ways of dealing with both in the Hillel sense is absolutely central
to
the
moment.
Of the moment, and we see these issues of defining a missile defense, all the issues that we're facing right now on the political scene are just all part of defining the way in which we're going to build this new civilization.
It's interesting to me in a certain sense. You said a lot of these things being taken at academia are being done at the level of university seminars, where they begin to step outside the disciplines in a way. People in the discipline can come in and maybe think about
exactly right.
with others. And that's an important, I don't know what that's called. It's beyond interdisciplinary studies or something, but it's seminar, but it's like that. So if we look at society, we have a geopolitical leadership pattern. We have the President of the United States. We have the whole corporate structure. We have this whole existing societal order that we have and so forth. So that they are, and as Marshall McLuhan used to say, the goldfish within the goldfish bowl can't see the bowl, or you have to get out of it.
Beautiful. I didn't know he said that, because I've been thinking the same thing.
Well, I'm not sure if he said it or if he recorded somebody who did. But anyway, the thing is that there'd be some place where the society, the things that are in place, the vested interests. We just had a senator change his thing, his his vote, his party affiliation. It's going to change all the chairmanships in the Senate and so forth now because it's all shifting over because
of a major change.
Yeah, it's a big change. Now those people are going to be all exercised by that kind of thing, but somewhere outside of it, people would be able to see it whole. Now the seminar is that way toward the academic place, let's just say for the university seminar. I would like to think communication in a certain sense. You're interested in communication with the seminar, man, computers, and society.
Yeah.
Computers are extensions of that. Right. And now with the internet, that's the thing. There's a place out there where you can begin to look at these patterns and perhaps bring signals of a distant early warning system or something that could have implication in terms of changing the order of organization that some people would think are set in place and forever. I mean, they're a way of liaisoning with the new order would be within institutions that aren't necessarily grounded in power, but might be able to have an influence in terms of bringing a new understanding to that.
Well, as a matter of fact, I have a wonderful,
it's a tricky thing.
I have a wonderful audio tape made probably 30 years ago by Margaret Mead and Herbert Kahn. What was his first name?
Irving Kahn.
No. I'm talking about the expert on nuclear warfare.
That was Irving Kahn at the Hudson Institute.
Not Irving.
I think it was.
Herman Kahn.
Herman. You're right. You're right.
Kahn.
You're right. Good. We got it right.
Herman Kahn.
You can't keep the Kahns straight.
Right. Anyhow, the two of them discussing. And this must have been about 1970 or so, discussing the year 2000 as they saw it then.
Oh, really?
And they had very different views of the kind of world that they both saw coming and sort of wanted to come. Kahn was a big system guy who saw whole
Hudson Institute.
I mean, saw the world as evolving as a total interrelated, total single system. And Margaret Mead much preferred a kind of disaggregated, small group kind of evolution. But so they had a wonderful discussion. I have that tape at some point. I'll have to lend
I'd love to hear it.
But the bottom line was that they both said talking about exactly the threats that we started out the discussion on, we have to have all kinds of blinking yellow lights for warning us of possibilities. And they were talking about global warming then as one of them, and of course the nuclear threat and others. Multiple blinking yellow lights, which all of us have to be aware of as we think about what we're doing when we're discussing this whole question of what kind of should we or should we not dump the ABM treaty? Should we or should we not put new missile systems dispersed in place as the Bush administration is currently talking about? These are complex but profoundly important questions which are going to shape the world. And as Dick Cheney said in this very interesting article in the New Yorker just a week or two ago, he said, we're shaping the 20th century right now, our 21st century right now. And the decisions we make, if they're wrong, we're going to live with them, or we may not be living with them.
Now, the we in that, Dick Cheney is a very powerful man in terms of the established geopolitical order and so forth. The vice president.
Up to 2 days ago.
Until 2 days ago, well, the Senate shifted. But you understand what I'm saying. The thing is that there's also a sense that I take a certain, I don't know if the solace. Not solace is the wrong word. I get a positive sense that there's 100 trillion cells, and each cell is part of the system of a human organism. Each one is part of it. There's an element of, I don't know, to use the term justice, there's an element of the involvement of great numbers of people. You think of the 6 billion people, and you touch on it, Kofi Annan does at the UN, that, they've got less than $1 a day, and they're suffering just degrading, grinding poverty. They can't nearly contribute to the degree that they would be able to, and yet the biological demand is that each cell in your organism is contributing maximally.
And yet they can, because each of the 6 billion of us are different, unique human beings with our own strengths and weaknesses, and our own possibilities. And certainly we're moving in terms of our own rethinking our education system to the kind of system which will more open the opportunity for each student to be able to learn about his own particular strengths rather than moving in a lockstep.
I understand it, except some of the things the UN studies tell us that the trends in terms of the haves and have-nots in the world are often going in the wrong direction. That the haves are getting havier and havier and have more, and the have-nots are growing. And that so there's an element that it is not just a thing that, gee, it would be nice that all these people be involved in a way that liberates them from grinding poverty or something of that sort of thing. We have the capability. It's like the emperor. We have the capability, but should we let the, we do have that capability now. And there's also lessons from biology and from other disciplines and everything that tell us that a healthy organism, call it the human society, needs these people to be participating in a way that that there's an ethical lesson or a lesson in there that comes back to the ultimate mission statement for this species here on this planet.
Last September had this meeting of all of the heads, not all, about 155 of the heads of states, and he had a wonderful top-down view from his perspective, and obviously it's a unique perspective in the sense that he is head of the Secretary General of the organization that attempts to bring all of the political entities on this planet together.
Should be supported.
And he had he said it may be, I forget what word he was, it was something like audacious or whatever for me to do so, but if I don't, and this was in preparation for that summit, but if I don't put a plan in place, he said, who will? And that it's a proposal to the heads of state and beyond the heads of state, to all 6 billion of us, to all the NGOs who are intermediary between the states and us as individuals, and for us as individuals to participate and think. And we had Tunji Lardner, if you remember, at the seminar from Africa
just last time.
Last time. And he was making exactly that point about what he's trying to do in Nigeria. So that you've got to involve people across the globe using this capability and really making a fundamental difference if we can.
Absolutely. And understanding the computers as you have from your academic background and with the seminar, that's a very important thing, because this is coming so rapidly now, and it's coming to many people out of the blue. And to understand the implications of the computer, man, and society, as the seminar does, has incredibly important implications, and they even are nested with the even larger implications that the seminar gives us all a chance to look at.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, listen, Seth, it's been a pleasure. I really thank you
very much.
No,
I hope it went well.
Well, I think it. How
are
can
we
it not
off,
go
or
well?
are we on?
No, we're still on. But I wanted to thank you. We're still on, and we just got started. We could wind up, start talking at greater length. But it's been your pleasure, and the audience have the perceptions then of Seth Neugroschl, and he's the co-chair, but the driving force behind this incredibly important and interesting ongoing university seminar at Columbia called Computers, Man, and Society, which I participate in. I'm very happy to be able to finally sit down and talk with Seth. He's one of the nicest guys I know, and really bright, and I really thank him very much for coming into the studio and for all the work over the years.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right. We on Conversations invite you to tune in. We'll be coming back again next week. That's it for this particular segment. One last time, Seth, thanks a lot for coming in, and until next time.